This is for educational use only. Our group is allowing our instructor, Mr. Roldan Ardines, to use this as an educational material.
Imagine a world where millions of people, men, women, and children are forced into exploitative situations they never choose. This is the harsh reality of human trafficking. Human trafficking is a global crime that affects every continent, yet remains largely hidden in plain sight. It's an industry driven by exploitation, generating over $150 billion each year, all while victims suffer in silence. Now, what exactly is human trafficking? At its core is the illegal act of recruiting, transporting, or harboring people by force, fraud, or coercion for exploitation. Victims are often trapped in forced labor, sex work, domestic servitude. In many cases, traffickers prey on vulnerable people, promising jobs or opportunities in other countries that seem too good to be true. Human trafficking is a violation of fundamental human rights and has been called modern-day slavery because it removes the freedom, dignity, and safety of the victims. In a world of rapid globalization and movement, trafficking has become an underground network operating across borders and challenging international laws. As we explore this topic further, keep in mind that while trafficking can affect anyone, people on the move, migrants, refugees, and the displaced face highest risks. In the next segment, we'll dive deeper in the building blocks of this crime, the three elements that define trafficking.
To truly understand human trafficking, it's essential to know how it operates. This crime can be broken down into three elements: the act, the means, and the purpose. Let's start with the act. This refers to what the traffickers do: recruiting, transporting, or even kidnapping individuals. The trafficker might approach someone with a job offer or even with a promise of education or marriage. These tactics lure people into the situations they may believe are legitimate. The next is the means. This is how traffickers control their victims. The means of involved force, fraud, or coercion. Some traffickers can cause physical violence, while others rely or threats, manipulation, or even taking away the victim's identification to prevent escape. Finally, there is the purpose, and this is why trafficking happens. For exploitation, this includes for the forced labor, sexual exploitation, or domestic servitude. Traffickers aim to profit by exploiting the victims in some form, and in each case, the victims get little to no control or often the cost. Understanding these three elements, the act, the means, and the purpose helps us identify human trafficking more accurately and respond more effectively. Now let's focus on the specific place where the crime persists, the Philippines, where human trafficking is a major challenge.
Human trafficking is an ongoing crisis in the Philippines, affecting thousands of people every year. With its unique geographic location and economic challenges, the Philippines has become both a source and transit point for the trafficking victims. Many Filipinos are promised jobs abroad, but instead, they end up in forced labor or sexual exploitation. In fact, it's estimated that thousands of Filipino men, women, and children are trafficked each year. Some are forced into domestic work in countries like the Middle East, while others end up in large urban areas where they are exploited in commercial industries. Poverty plays a significant role, as traffickers often target individuals who are desperate for economic stability. The government has taken steps to combat trafficking, including stricter laws, partnerships with international organizations, and awareness campaigns. However, challenges remain. The demand for overseas work, combined with the country's vast coastline and remote regions, make it difficult to track and stop trafficking operations effectively. As we explore further, we'll see how migration and trafficking are closely linked. Many trafficking cases begin with the desire to migrate in each of better opportunities, a factor that traffickers exploit all too well.
Migration is a powerful tool for individuals seeking better opportunities, but for some, the journey to a new life becomes a trap. Human trafficking often targets those who migrate, especially when they do so in search of jobs and or safety in unfamiliar places. Here are some works when people migrate, especially across borders. They're often vulnerable. They may lack stable income, local support, or even legal status in their new country. This vulnerability becomes the opportunity for traffickers who exploits migrants' hopes for a better life. A trafficker might offer someone a job overseas, but instead a person ends up with a trap in forced labor or worse. In fact, many cases of trafficking begins with the promises of employment or escape from conflict. Migrants fleeing hardships are particularly at risk as often they lack official documents and depends on smugglers or unofficial channels. This dependency increases their vulnerability and make it harder for them to reach out for help if they exploited.
When people migrate, they don't lose their basic human rights. Every migrant is entitled to fundamental protections regardless of their status. This framework is critical as it establishes their rights to safety, freedom for exploitation, and a fair chance to pursue a livelihood. However, these rights are often violated when trafficking enters the picture. According to international law, including the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, every person has the right to life, liberty, and security. For migrants, these rights are extend to safe and lawful working conditions, freedom from forced labor, and access to support if they're victims of exploitation. But when trafficking occurs, these basic rights are stripped away. Victims are often denied access to justice, may not receive fair pay, or in many cases receive no compensation for their work at all. They're kept in isolation, often prevented from contacting family, and may face severe penalties if they attempt to escape. These protections are not just ideals, they are standards set to prevent exploitation and ensure fair treatment. Yet, in cases of trafficking, these rights become distant. Our next segment will take a closer look at how human trafficking specifically violates these basic rights and devastating impact this has on individuals.
The human rights violation in human trafficking. So, of course, human trafficking isn't just a crime, but it's a severe violation of our human rights. Trafficking deprives individuals of their dignity, freedom, and safety. Victims often face forced labor, coercive control, and many cases, the physical and psychological abuse. These aren't just wrongs, they are direct violations of fundamental human rights. Imagine being forced to work for long hours in unsafe conditions with no pay, no freedom to live, and no access to help. Victims are often kept under tight control, whether it's by threats, to physical constraint, or confiscation of passports. This isolation makes it nearly impossible for them to escape or seek support. Being taken and symbolizing the control traffickers exert over their victims. Beyond this physical control, traffickers use manipulation and fear to psychological trap their victims. Some victims are threatened with harm to their families or if they are try to escape. Others are told about authorities won't help them or may even punish them. So this fear keeps them locked in a cycle of exploitation with little hope for freedom. So these will go to showing their emotional expressions of fear, loneliness, and exhaustion in the faces of trafficked individuals. Of course, understanding these human rights violations highlights just how serious trafficking is, not only as a crime but as a profound moral and an ethical violation. In our next segment, we'll zoom out to consider the larger effects of human trafficking on society and the global economy.
When we think about globalization, we often think of interconnected economies, the flow of goods, and the movement of people across borders. But there is a darker side to this interconnected world: human trafficking. Trafficking doesn't just harm individual victims, it impacts economies and disrupts communities and undermines the principles of the fair labor and the human rights on a global scale. The illegal profits from trafficking reach over $150 billion annually, making it one of the largest criminal industries in the world. When trafficked individuals are forced into labor or exploitation, it disrupts fair competitions and drives down wages, especially industries in like agriculture, construction, and domestic work. This creates unfair labor practice that hurts everyone, not just victims. Trafficking also harms countries economically. Victims who might have contributed productively and communities are instead forced into cycles of exploitation. The healthcare, legal, and social service costs that assisting trafficking victims can strain public resources. On societal level, trafficking fuels inequality, weakens trust in institutions, and purchase poverty and instability in vulnerable regions. By understanding trafficking impact on globalizations, we recognize that it's not only a human rights issue but an economic and social one too. Tackling trafficking benefits everyone, not just victims. In the segment, we'll explore what's being done worldwide to combat human trafficking and project vulnerable population.
Human trafficking is a global crime, and combating it requires a coordinated international response. Governments, organizations, and communities are working together to stop trafficking and protect victims. Let's look at some of the legal and social approaches that are making a difference. At the legal level, international agreements like the United Nations Palermo Protocol have to set clear standards to prevent trafficking, protect victims, and prosecute traffickers. Many countries, including the Philippines, have adopted strict anti-trafficking laws and partnered with organizations to enforce these laws and bring traffickers to justice. Socially, community awareness programs are vital. Local organizations and NGOs work tirelessly to educate people about traffickers' risks, especially in vulnerable communities. They hold workshops, distribute resources, and provide hotlines for people to report suspicious activities. Support for victims in another critical area. Shelters and counseling and legal aid give survivors a path to rebuild their lives. These efforts are a testament of the power of collective action, but there's always more to do. Ending trafficking requires global commitment, form, policies, and awareness to individual action. In our final segment, We'll discuss how to each of us can contribute to the fight against human trafficking.
Human trafficking is a global crisis, but it's also one that we can help combat. Throughout this report, we've learned about the human rights, abuses, the victims, and the broader impact on societies. Now the question is, what can we do to make a difference? First, be informed and aware. Understanding the signs of trafficking, like people who seem too isolated, controlled, or unable to speak freely, can help you recognize potential victims. Many trafficking cases are uncovered by ordinary people who noticed something unusual and reported it. Knowing the red flags is a powerful first step. Supporting anti-trafficking organizations is another impactful way to help. Groups like the International Labour Organization, local NGOs, and advocacy centers need funding and volunteers. Your support helps these organizations provide critical resources to victims, raise awareness, and push for stronger laws. And finally, spread the word. Share what you've learned with others, whether through social media, community, discussions, or school projects. When we raise awareness, we make it harder for traffickers to operate and easier for victims to find support. Together, we can help put an end to human trafficking. It starts with awareness, continues with action, and grows with collective commitment to uphold human rights for everyone. Thank you for watching, and remember, every action counts.